Good morning, everybody. Melda, can you hear me? Ali, can you hear me? Lovely. Welcome to the pivot panel. Obviously, the word pivot is a much used word these days. Apologies for bringing it up here again. Today's panel, I hope you're going to find very educational. And well, we all know, don't we, it's easy to be good in the good times, but it's, you know, when the chip's down, do we truly see what people are made of, but also brands, and we're discussing brands' new place in the world in a post-COVID environment. We've got some fabulous speakers, one of which is a little later joining us. That's Pete Markey from the TSB. So I will be intermittently checking to see if he's arrived yet. Just the little screen here. My name is Michael Brown. I am the Managing Director of MKTG. We are a business who trade exclusively in the live space, actually, so live events, experiential marketing, sponsorship marketing, and sponsorship negotiation. So as such, we are an agency brand that has been hit particularly hard in the current climate, and certainly pivoting and evolution and evolving are words that we consider almost on a daily basis now. To discuss similar topics, and I'm going to introduce the panel in no short order, getting to discuss a little bit about what they do, their name, role, and job title, etc. So I'm going to start in no particular order. Melda, do you want to give us a brief intro about your good self?
Thanks, Michael, and thanks to the MKTG team for having me today. Looking forward to the discussion. So I'm Melda Simon, I'm the founder of Little Fires. We're a sustainability and communications consultancy. So we help brands develop more responsible and sustainable business practices, and we also help them communicate those important short fires. I worked in-house at Unilever within the global marketing function, and then before that I've spent more than a decade agency side working for a number of different brands, from Ferrari to Max Factor to Pernod Ricard. So that's me, and thanks for having me.
And why the name? Why Little Fires? What does that actually mean, Melda?
Good question, thank you. It came, and I'm going to get the quote wrong, aren't I? But it came from Jane Goodall, who's, for those that know, a wonderful woman and environmental activist. And she is of the belief, as am I, which is that the little things that we incrementally do make a big difference. And so Little Fires is alluding to that. I think lots of people are very afraid to start on the sustainability journey for whatever reason. And I think the little things that we do can all add up to make a big, huge difference to the world.
Fabulous, perfect name, perfect times. Ali, I'm going to ask you to do the same.
Hi everybody, hi Michael, and thanks again, as Mel said, to MKTG for hosting this. My name's Ali Jones, I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at the Co-op. I've been at the Co-op for about 2.5 years, and it is truly an incredible brand, and this pivot panel could not be more aligned to what's going on in our business in past and in the current future. I've been in retail all my working life, but this is my first foray into food, which is exciting. But I've worked at lots of other big names like Arcadia, M&S, Debenhams, and a stint working for Woolworths in Australia. And what's exciting about working at the Co-op is, obviously we all know the Co-op as a great convenience food chain, but I also look after our health business. We have a pharmacy business that we've just launched. We do insurance, and we do funerals. And I think when I remember coming in and thinking about, I'm going to run a brand that's responsible for convenience food, funerals and insurance, how on earth did that come together? But bizarrely, if you look at particularly our funerals and food business, we are absolutely in front and centre in the pandemic at the moment for the right reasons and unfortunately the wrong reasons. So it's been a very interesting last 3 weeks. But yeah, great to meet everybody.
Thanks for joining us, and I'm relieved and pleased to see Peter Markey join us in the bottom right of the screen there. Thanks for coming, Peter. I appreciate it.
Great to be here, Michael. Hello, everyone.
Thank you. I was just getting everybody to say who they are, a little bit about their role, Peter. If you could indulge us on that, that would be lovely.
No worries. Well, hello everyone. I'm Pete Markey. I look after marketing for TSB. We're one of the UK's main challenger banks, my day job involves everything from sponsorship to brand to marketing to digital and data. I'm very happy to be here. And I think it's been an interesting few weeks, I think, for all of us. So happy to share more of that on this call.
Lovely. Thank you, Peter. Lovely. Well, with no further ado, then let's get on with it. Just a couple more bits of housekeeping. There is a Q&A feature and function on this in the at the bottom of the screen. So if anybody has got any questions that they think of, please tap them in. And towards the end of it, I will pick a couple of the most salient and ask the most relevant guest on the panel to answer them. And I'm also going to, you'll have to indulge me further, trying to launch a couple of polls as we go en route. That's a first time functionality for me, so forgive me if I get that a little wrong. And as we go, we'll try to not to use, there will be penalties for using the term the new normal and unprecedented times. So each time we use those, send us a little note and we'll find some way to donate to charity. Ali, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to pick on you. Apologies. So the co-op, it makes, well, bold value statements on its on your corporate website that principles are more valued than profits. And your values framework, it includes things like self-help, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, equity, but pertinent to all is the word solidarity, actually, which for me means standing with and for your community in difficult times. So could you then describe how the pandemic has proven the value of the co-op's values and how those qualities, principles have been brought to life to make everyone's life a little easier in this new normal? And there you go, I've said it. Slap wrist for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael, for your question. That's a humdinger of a question. I think it's funny that our buzzword that we use a lot, funnily enough, is pivot. And I love putting into the chat box the picture of Ross and Chandler from Friends trying to pivot the sofa up the back stairs. So all those Friends fans will remember that. So the values that you create are really important to us. But actually, what we have done to simplify things, and this has happened before the pandemic, was our vision, which is cooperating for a fairer world, because the communities that we serve, there are inequalities out there, and it is our role as a very community-based business to be able to support them. I think when the pandemic hit, we were able to respond at absolute pace because it's in the DNA of our business. So we didn't have to think about, well, what's our way we're going to help the communities and help people. But I think one of the things that we made a very conscious decision on straight away is the absolute number one priority was our colleagues. And it was absolutely fantastic that everyone recognised the colleagues both in our funeral homes and in our food stores were key workers. Yeah. And so when it hit and before we went into lockdown, the first priority is what are we going to do? Whether that be communication to reassure them of how we're going to support them, whether that be PPE, whether that be making sure that, you know, all those people who had to self-isolate because of either their age, medical condition, or they had somebody they needed to care for, we protected their salaries, we protected their livelihoods, but then we quickly galvanised about 6,000 temps to come into our stores and depots, and really making sure that those colleagues felt protected, listened to, and part of dealing with this pandemic was fundamental. And I forget which very clever boffin said, you know, look, if you look after your colleagues, they'll look after your customers. I'm not very good at remembering who said these great things, but the fact that I remember the content is probably more important. But that in itself has really helped us. And our colleagues are at the heart of our communities anyway. And so we didn't have to, as a business or a brand, say, right, this is what we're going to do. The colleagues knew what to do. If they were near a hospital, they lent in to support those NHS workers. Yes, we created the shopping hour for them, but they used flexibility of supporting, knowing the shifts of the local hospitals. They supported food parcels. They set up vulnerable shopping telephone lines, etc., etc. And they lent in to do what that community needed. And as a brand owner, if I can say this, you know, I encourage our colleagues to use social media. We have a social hub that we use, which we provide some guidelines and content, but we encourage them to talk and connect with their local community. And I spend a lot of time following them on either an internal Yammer page or on Twitter, Facebook, etc. And there was nothing I saw that I thought I'm uncomfortable about. And that just shows that the DNA of our brand isn't just about comms, it's about every little action, every little act of cooperation that everybody in our business does. And it's those cumulative effects. And it's interesting because that's obviously the philosophy of Mel's business. It's all those little cumulative effects that actually really make a business do well. And whether that be from a brand resonance point of view or just, you know, getting people to come into their shops or come into their business to buy their products and services, it's really, really fundamental. So, you know, it's been a horrendous sort of time for colleagues and for customers and communities alike. But the foundations of the co-op has meant that we've been able to respond very, very quickly and do the right things as best as we possibly can. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight.
I think what you're saying is that you're the business that is already geared up to pivoting, and maybe pivoting should be.
I mean, I don't think we're definitely not perfect at pivoting. We still have some governance structures which frustrate me and we don't move quick enough. But because the fact that our business is set up to serve our local community and to support them, means that actually we could lean into it quickly. I still think we've got work to do to make ourselves even more agile. And again, there's a quote I read the other day, you know, we've had decades worth of change in the matter of weeks. And that has really challenged us as a business to move towards. But when the fundamental DNAs of how we operate are all about trying to look after our colleagues, our customers, members and communities, it means it's a bit easier.
Wow, of course. Brilliant. And funnily enough, I did launch a little poll there, Ali, just at the end of your you speaking, and asking everybody if they felt that the businesses where they work had pivoted in some way during the crisis, and overwhelmingly 91% of the respondents have said yes. So that's encouraging. Nobody said don't know. That's even more encouraging. Lovely. Brilliant. So Peter, the TSB is undeniable heritage here, hasn't it, really? I mean, your core principle is you don't do investment banking, finance speculation, big corporation investment, your local bank catering to local interests. And in fact, most of them have been criticised, haven't they, for not doing enough for small businesses during this. So you could say that spoke to value. So do you think then that the TSB's values are critical values, or is the pivot that you need to make?
I think just building what Ali's saying, that you know, at this time, I think it's been a great reflection back on, you know, the purpose of our organisation, our values, and what we stand for, and making sure that those are true and lived and breathed. And I think the last 12 weeks have, again, as Ali's indicated, I think been difficult for all of us, haven't they, and challenging. But at the heart of our business, and part of what attracted me to join 3 years ago, was the business has a real beating heart. People genuinely care. And it sounds like Co-op's a business like that. I've had the good fortune to work in companies that are just like that. I've also worked for some businesses where it's very hard to even find a pulse, to find a beating heart. Whereas it's great within TSB to know that there are genuinely people that care both about customers and about colleagues as well. And our purpose is about giving everyone money confidence for everyone every day. And people's finances have understandably been impacted in a whole range of ways because of COVID-19. So we've introduced repayment holidays, changes to overdraft pricing, and you refer to things like the bounce back loans for small businesses, all of which has been really important to help support people right now in the moments they need it. And we've done everything we can to keep as many branches open for as long as possible, call centres open. But, you know, back to the pivot bit, pivoting has been more around, you know, how we pivot, you know, keeping the same core purpose and the core focus, how we pivot to evolve our business to work in a way that can meet the challenges we faced at the moment. So it hasn't been possible to keep every branch open. If there's been a suspected outbreak of COVID-19 in any branch, or people have got symptoms, we then have to close that branch. So we've had some colleagues working from home, some colleagues unable to travel in to work in their call centre roles. So we actually trained up 400 people and put them live using a live person tool on our website where they're answering customer queries at home. So we have a small bit of AI in front of that, but the majority are real people. And we've seen a really big increase in the use of that service over the last few weeks, particularly since we started advertising it. So pivoting has been more about how we keep providing that human, community-based real service, but find different and other and digital ways to be able to do that.
Fabulous. I think what you're speaking to, it brings us back to the word that got mentioned earlier on, to community. I actually banked, you'll be pleased to hear, Peter, I've banked with the TSB since I was 6. I do feel it as a community brand.
That's why I like you so much, Michael. We always get on, don't we?
Yeah, good plug there. So, can you elaborate on sort of what community means then? And everybody's got a different view of this. That will change, that perspective will change which brand you are. But how does the TSB define community? How important is it? Or how it's reflected in communications? Not after the pandemic.
Yeah, I think we probably all found that communities been more important than ever, but it's interesting in community when you can't physically meet up with people. So I think for me, communities become more defined by how you feel connected and what you feel connected to. So we sponsor Pride of Britain. We're in our 4th year now doing that. We just extend that for another 5 years. Pride of Britain's a big event where we recognise real everyday heroes who go out of their way to help other people. And that can be extraordinary acts of bravery, people that set up charities, or as we're finding right now, the amazing frontline workers, in the NHS, in other parts of retail, like the Co-op and other parts. So all of the Pride of Britain works to recognise that. So actually we found that telling stories of everyday people and the difference they're making in their communities has actually performed really well in terms of engagement rates and interaction with our brand over the last few months. And Pride of Britain gives us a narrative into that. We did an ad-funded programme with Channel 4 called The Unsung Heroes of Coronavirus, deliberately again to underline the key people that are making a real difference in keeping Britain and keeping communities going at the moment. But as we're all finding with the likes of Zoom, a lot of connectivity now is happening in a virtual world. And so community still has a really big role to play. So as I was saying a moment ago, with our staff working from home, but working more in digital, for them still feeling connected and helping customers in a real and personal way, I think adds to that feel of there's a community of people who've got their arms, supporting you and looking out for you at the moment. And interestingly, the most successful post we've done on social media all year, and it's pretty obvious when I name it, is Captain, who's now Colonel Tom Moore, got a Pride of Britain award, and he got given it live on Good Morning Britain. And because of our partnership, we were able to announce that. And engagement on that single post and what came from that has been enormous. So there's a lot of heart and goodwill, I think, for people that are doing extraordinary things in communities right now. And I think you'll see that thread continue. But as you say, that's very much been part of our brand. The Reverend Henry Duncan founded TSB a few hundred years ago. And that, his ethos still flows through what we're looking to do and trying to do today, in both communities and Britain as a whole.
Brilliant. I guess the thing with pivoting is that it's about adapting to consumer change. And just at the tail end of your conversation there, Peter, I did launch another poll, and it was asking the attendees if they believed consumption habits will change for the better in a post-COVID world. And I think that's what pivoting about. And 79% of those respondents said yes. 12% said no. So, but I think a minority by comparison. So that's interesting. I think as a motivation to pivot, it's about reacting to the new consumer paradigm. I'll share those results on the screen there. So Melda, I'm going to pick on you now. I guess it seems that improving community at a local level is one of the ways that brands might drill down, if you like, into their behaviour. But it seems I should bring that other buzzword that gets bandied around a lot: a purpose. So improving community could be a new purpose, a way to pivot. So as a consultant, Melda, who's set up to advise everybody, brands, etc., in purpose, are we going to see then a proliferation of brands who pivot towards new ideals, new purposes, will anyone be able to live up to them? And I guess, if so, what are the watch outs when pivoting along that, in that way? Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. I think the short answer is yes. I think we will see a proliferation of brands. I think purpose is having its heyday. And I know our industry is bandied around the term for quite some while, and it's been, is it a buzzword, marketing fad, all these questions around brand purpose and social purpose. But I don't think there's much leverage to dispute it anymore. I think before the coronavirus, we were seeing investors and consumers call on brands and businesses to be more accountable, right? Do good, help solve society's ills. And I think we're just going to see a proliferation of that demand, particularly as we see the distrust in politicians and governments and certain other institutions fall. More and more people, consumers and investors and other stakeholders are going to look to brands and businesses to fill that void. I was reading a stat the other day which said 1 in 3 people have stopped buying a brand because of how they responded during the coronavirus. And I just think that consumer activism, the voting with your wallet, that consumer activism is just going to become more and more of a reality for brands. And so defining what you stand for beyond making money, beyond just a transaction, is going to be more and more important. And if I reflect on some of the brands that have pivoted and may perhaps, been more successful during this crisis, it is those with a real sense of who they are in the world. Ali and Peter have spoken about their brands and the core DNA of those brands, allowing them to respond, in times of need. And I think, there are many examples where you can look at brands and where they have a clear purpose and a core set of values, they're able to respond and adapt in a much more agile and effective manner. One of the examples I really love, and it's a simple one, but it just kind of illustrates the point, is Brewdog. So not only did they repurpose their production line to make hand sanitizer, which we've seen a lot of alcohol brands do, Diageo, etc. What they did is go back to the core of what that brand stands for, which is community, and launched, I think it's more than 100 online bars. So connecting locals and regulars virtually through online bars with pub quizzes and various other kind of forms of entertainment. And in the statement by the co-founder, in fact, I'll read it out, community has always been at the absolute core of what we do. So understanding that as a core DNA of the brand allowed them to pivot and be effective. And I think we're seeing lots of brands do that. And it's those brands with a clear purpose that are doing it better. eBay is another example I really like, actually. eBay exists to, yes, connect buyers and sellers, but also to stimulate economic growth. So what they noticed pretty early on in the crisis was there was a bunch of retailers that don't have an e-commerce site. So they put millions of dollars into supporting smaller retailers and getting them up and running with e-commerce sites and with all the free advice that comes with that. And again, it's that core sense of why we exist in the world, to stimulate economic growth, that allowed them to do that and pivot in an effective way. How many times have I said pivot? Is there a swear jar for pivot? But I think the point, it's echoing what Ali said. It's if you know what you stand for, what your DNA is, it allows you to adapt more swiftly. I think the final part of the question was watch outs, wasn't it? Which is an interesting one. I don't think the watch outs around brand purpose or social purpose are any different now than they were pre-pandemic. It's align your purpose with your core values and vision as a company, so it's authentic. I think what Peter was touching on was making sure that you live those values through your organization first before you make them a marketing message. Your employees, your stakeholders across your entire value chain have to really understand, buy into that purpose for it to feel real. You have to live and breathe it before you communicate it. And I also think what we need to be careful of if brands are starting to switch to kind of new ideals and purpose-driven comms is that it's a long-term commitment. There needs to be action. I've worked at Unilever and I now work for Unilever, and I have done for many years. What you do is more important than what you say, or just as important as what you say. And so making sure that you have long-term commitment and actions to back up your purpose and what you're trying to improve in the world is really, really vital. And I think, just one final point, but the other watch out for me is that for any business, any founder, any entrepreneur, any brand right now, every part of your communications is under scrutiny. And we have seen backlash. You know, if I think about the backlash against Virgin and Richard Branson, JD Wetherspoons for their treatment of their employees, more than ever, you know, holistic comms approach, what you do and say across every kind of channel through every stakeholder is more important than ever, because people are looking and they will call you out on it. And we've seen backlash on certain brands. So people first. And the, you know, breathing your purpose and your values internally, more important than ever.
Absolutely. Actually, it's funny you mentioned Brewdog. My favourite activation that they did during this crisis, I think it brought a smile to everybody's lips, even though the message was quite serious. They launched their Barnard Castle eye test variation. Did you see that?
Right, yeah.
To Dominic coming in trip up north. I thought that
very good. Yeah.
That was funny, yeah, absolutely. I want to come back to you, Ali, on this point. When we had a conversation briefly in the run up to this into this session, we were talking about sort of local level activations, because everybody here on this panel are sort of head office type people, aren't they, including myself? So it's one thing, isn't it, to have these grand plans, if you like, to pivot. But how do you activate the troops essentially at the front line? And it strikes me that some of what you said, Peter, about your local level activations, your call centres, and what you were talking to me about handing over responsibility to local managers in digital stores, Ali, was quite striking compared to other brands. Could you elaborate a little on that? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, and I think this has been a part of what we do anyway, because I think as in One Angel Square, where we are in Manchester, we are in service of our frontline colleagues. So yeah, we have a mantra: you either serve a customer or you serve someone who does. And clearly we need to provide frameworks and guidance and tools, etc., for those teams to be efficient, so that we have consistent customer service, etc., etc. But empowering our colleagues to do the right thing is really, really important. So some of the things that we've already instigated is, you know, we don't do a charity of the year like a lot of brands do. We run our local community fund. And that is, we have at any one time 4,500 local charities that tend to be forgotten by big businesses and need relatively small amounts of money, but that go a significant way in that local community. And when we support them, we as Co-op provide money, but actually our members donate 1% of their spend to that local community fund. And we do a big call to arms to get causes to reach out. But what we do is that the store managers, and we have a network of what's called member pioneers, which are colleagues or people in the local community who we provide funds to give them a salary, and they are the connectors between the brand, the funeral homes, and the stores and the local communities, and they work in that local community. We get about 15,000 causes connect with us, but what we do is it is those store managers and those funeral directors that choose which 3 causes that we support at any one time, because they know the ones that need it most. So if you were up in the north and when the floods were happening, we make sure that those are the causes that we support. If you are in a particular area of the country where knife crime is a real problem, then that's what we lean into and support. And so it's absolutely based on what is going on. And those member pioneers, as I mentioned, are real connectors. And what we have seen in the pandemic is just the power of some of those voices. And so we've just initiated a call for talent program, where we're actually getting those frontline colleagues working on more projects to help us to define how we evolve our business and our community activity going forward. And what we've learned from having to be virtual is that we can get together store managers from Stornoway in Scotland, from Cornwall, from London. They don't all have to come to our Manchester office to sit round to have that hackathon. Actually, we can use it doing technology. So that has opened ourselves up to getting a much more diverse mix of conversation. And so we're able to bring in a much more stronger BAME representative into the conversation. We've done an awful lot of work recently around talent development in that area, but also we have area managers and store managers that are Generation Alpha. So, 25 and under. So we're bringing those conversations in, and it's a totally non-hierarchical approach. Everybody has a voice in the room, and that is helping us to really bring that hyper-local grassroots information into some of our decision making, and allowing us to go at speed, which is super exciting. So yeah, that's some of the things that we're doing to make sure we're really truly community focused. Hopefully that makes sense.
It certainly does, Ali. Thank you very much, and very inspiring too. I think I just learned something there as well, Ali, and that Generation Alpha is not a term that I've heard until you just.
I think it's after Generation Z, isn't it, or Millennials? Yeah, I'm really rubbish at this as well, but it's the next one after Millennials.
Yeah, it is. Right. Yeah.
Lovely, Peter. I'm sorry, I'm conscious of the time there. Because the TSB is so focused on at the local level, motivate, galvanise, as I said earlier. Is that something the TSB has found happy for? Everybody taking up the TSB front line?
Yeah, I mean, similar to Ali, I think we do fundraising for local smaller charities, which I think is really important, because often, as Ali indicates, charities get forgotten about. In terms of how particularly branch partners have acted through the last few weeks, so our colleagues who work in the 400 or 500 branches we've got, it's been all about keeping services open and helping people in those local communities. So primarily support through branches, but we've got some incredible stories of colleagues who spotted needs of people coming into branches and then have gone and done shopping runs for them or helped them there and then with specific things. We've also had a really big program of outbound calling from the branches, customers who may be in the most vulnerable situations, so people that have carers or elderly customers who may be on their own or more vulnerable. Because I think one of the challenges of the last few weeks, isn't it, has been how much we've all relied on digital, and it's not always easy for everyone to access digital services. So we've done a lot to reach out and contact those people in the greatest need, for whom those services are not perhaps the most readily available or easiest to access. So I've been super impressed by the engagement at local level from our colleagues. It's been great.
Amazing. So purpose then, purpose, it should, in theory at least, a more thoughtful consumption, but also in the way we do our business. So we're all in the business of advertising, really, let's face it. And to that end, there are many voices pointing out the benefits, if you like, to the environment since COVID took hold. So we might think of that as a benefit in dark times. So you might look at that as an accelerated and enforced pivot. I think we as marketers would say that everything we did needed to move a lot quicker in terms of the environment, sustainability, etc. And as we touched on previous, many are calling for a reset in our consumption habits and Melda, I'm using your term, build back better. And I'm going to ask you, pull you back into the conversation as a last thing to finish. So what's your view? How are brands going to respond to this particular challenge? And indeed, actually thinking about it, is it a brand's place to save the world, I suppose, is where we're going to with this.
Yeah. I'm full of hope of what I've seen, some of the movements I've seen in the last couple of weeks. I hope everyone can hear me all right. Am I still clear to everyone, by the way? Yeah? Okay, good. I've just got a weird flash from my Wi-Fi. I think it was last week we saw more than 200 business leaders from Unilever to HSBC to Asda to Sky all sign a letter to Boris Johnson saying we must ensure the UK recovery plan aligns with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We've seen, your poll echoes some external research I was reading, with 80% of consumers saying that they're willing to make changes as big as those that they've made during the coronavirus to help the climate change. I think we will see changes in business practice, and we will see changes in behaviour. I'm hopeful we will. All the indications suggest that we will, and it's about time. Sorry, the second part of your question, Michael.
Well, it was the brands. It's how are brands responding to that in the context.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
improved since COVID, since that lockdown at a global level.
Yeah.
How are brands going to respond to that once lockdown's over, I suppose?
Yeah. I think it comes back to demand again and the expectations that we're placing on brands to help play a bigger role in society to help fix some of the problems. We can't deny we're going to be coming out of this pandemic to some scary issues, poverty gaps, greater inequality gaps, food insecurity. All these things are real tangible problems in the world, and brands are realizing and businesses are realizing that a collaboration and a collective approach to solving these is important. And I come back to my point around consumer activism. It's expected of brands to respond. And I think we're already seeing some really, really bold and transformative moves. I think of Gucci, in the fashion world, Gucci coming out and saying we're moving from 5 seasons to 2 is a really bold move. We all know what's going on in the fashion industry in terms of overproduction. And I think brands as prolific as Gucci coming out and making these bold changes is going to inspire others to do the same.
Lovely. Yeah. Emily Underhill, one of our attendees, has sent a message saying that Burberry have impressed her of late. I think they donated quite a significant chunk of PPE, didn't they, to
Michael, if I could just build
Yeah.
Mel's point. I think one of the things that concerns me, and it's at the heart of Mel's business, is sustainability. I am very conscious that the name Greta Thunberg has not been mentioned for 12, 14 weeks.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And, that was a big pivot that we as a global society, as well as a UK society, were making in terms of really recognising the fact that we needed to change our consumption habits, whether it be in relation to carbon emissions, whether that be in relation to plastics, etc. And totally understandably, from a media perspective, a social media perspective, and just a general conversation, that has come off the agenda. But there are some critical things that are happening. PPE equipment and the consumer's need for better hygiene because of the concern about the virus means that we are now creating more plastic than ever before. And so we have got to still be on the case to make sure that, there is good plastic. And let's be absolutely clear, if we're going to stop having horrendous food waste problems and we're going to protect people with PPE, we need plastic, but it needs to be good plastic. And we need support from government and local authorities to actually have the facility to be able to recycle that good plastic. And at the Co-op, we've been really, really championing it. And we're very conscious that we need to make sure, and we are behind the scenes still doing all the development we need with our suppliers in our stores, etc. But also the carbon emission piece. We've all seen pictures of, Venice, pictures of the Bosphorus in Istanbul that haven't got the pollution, that look beautiful and blue and gorgeous. So we have had 3 months where we haven't had industry, planes, trains and automobiles sending out carbon emissions. But what habits are we going to make sure that we change so that we still make those improvements and focus on those things, while also addressing, the impacts of a recession that are going to come through. And I'd hate for us to be how consumers responded in 2008, where we actually stopped caring about ethics. We stopped caring about sustainability. It was all about cheapest price. And some of the fast fashion came up, and absolutely what Melda was saying about Gucci, is important. So we've got to strike the right balance between giving great value to our customers, supporting our communities, and making sure that sustainability is in the right way, front and centre.
And I think we're going to see more brands move to educating consumers around sustainability. I do. Google said that in April, the increase in the search term, how do I live a more sustainable lifestyle, was up by sort of 4,000% or some sort of, don't quote me on that, but ridiculously high. I think the intention is there, right? I think we've all lived through this. We know how quickly we can adapt and change. We know that normal isn't necessary. And I think that, we've seen that we can change, we've seen society can change, we've all seen the images of sort of no air pollution and sort of turtles laying eggs on beaches and things, and all that beautiful stuff. So I think there's a new understanding that when we all come together, we can make this happen, and we can make it happen fast. And I think we'll see more and more brands trying to play a bit more front and center role in helping consumers navigate what does living a sustainable lifestyle really mean, which is fantastic.
Thanks, Melda. Yeah, encouragingly, as we were speaking there, I launched another poll, and it was asking the guests here as to whether they thought the organisation that they worked for had lived up to its values, and obviously sustainability and environment is a value during the pandemic. And encouragingly, 77%.
Well, that's good.
So that is good, yeah. So a little bit of work for some brands and organisations to do, but overwhelmingly that seems like we're on the right track. I'm conscious of the time, team. So I've got one more question to ask each of the panelists. I'm surprising you with it, I suppose, but it's and I know, Mel, you've already mentioned some of your favourites, but just for each of the panelists here, before we move to the questions, has there been a favourite brand pivot that's come to your attention? Or if you can't answer that, is there a pivot that you yourself personally intend to make after the lockdown? Shall I pick on you, Peter, for a quick answer to that one?
No problem. There are so many great brand examples. The ones that stood out to me, I think, are those that have done stuff with their core values and their core business. So Morrison's providing food for food banks that have had real challenge over the last few months. And then on the ground, businesses like Pret, who've been supplying sandwiches to the homeless. I think for me, it's those businesses that have looked beyond short-term profit and gone, actually, there's a bigger thing going on here, and we have to make a difference right now. Whatever that costs us in this moment, the right thing to do is this. And I hope that sort of attitude and behaviour continues, because it's core to those brands' values. And I think it's been done from the right place, which I think is a really important bit.
Lovely. And you personally, Pete, anything towards?
I think that we've talked a bit about travel, haven't we? And I most of my team work in Bristol. I work for a business that has headquarters in Spain. I'm often travelling between Edinburgh and other sites. I think my big learning, both for me and the team, has been how actually technology can go so much further than we ever thought it could. And we probably move forward. I think as Melda said this a moment ago, I think we've moved forward probably 10 years in 12 weeks in terms of the way we work and what we do. And I don't think we will go back to, I'm going to use those words, normal or new normal. I think it's going to be quite a different situation where we'll be in offices less, there'll be more remote working, and travel will rightly come down. And I think that's good. So I'm determined to do that. And I'm in a business that wants to learn right now and make those changes too.
Thanks, Peter. Good answer. Ali, how about you in this domain?
I think to Pete's point, there's been a lot of really great brands, but I think the one I wanted to call out was, and I was very ignorant to this because I'm not a football fan, but there is I believe he's a Man United player called Marcus Rashford, who we ended up partnering with, who went out very publicly in support of the point Pete was making about food banks. And he saw that we, like Morrison's, we were the first to donate 1.5 million to Fair Share. And then Morrison's came in afterwards, and luckily for them, they've got a slightly bigger checkbook than us. But he called us out as, thank you very much for what you were doing, because he was very much brought up as a child on food bank donations, and so he's very aware of the challenges that a lot of our communities have. And he reached out on Twitter and sort of said, thank you, Co-op, this is brilliant. And then he's just continued at a time when a lot of footballers around the whole furlough, the football clubs and the furlough thing were criticised. He just went out there and then, worked, as I said, reached out to us, thanked us, and then worked with us. And, as part of him wanting to drive awareness for it, appeared in our second ad, because we've donated about £4 million worth of media value to creating campaigns to get local communities and colleagues, members and customers to donate even more than we did to Fair Share and local food banks. And he just basically was like, I want to lean in and help. This is a real problem. I've got a fan base, I've got a face. This is really, really important to me. And I'm not a massive football fan at all, but I just thought, what a brilliant guy that was just so humble to get behind it. And I think on your second question, I'm kind of, again, similar to Pete, although I am desperately missing being with people. I get a lot of energy from being in rooms with people, and we all know that 60-70% of communication is non-verbal, and so I do find technology quite difficult, particularly when people's internets are understandably not great, and so we all turn the cameras off, and so you're presenting or having a debate about something and you can't see anybody, and there's this horrendous Teams silence, and you don't know whether people are nodding behind their camera going, I agree, or they're sat there going, WTF, what is this woman talking about? So I am really, really looking forward to trying to work out what's that hybrid model, because yes, as Pete said, we don't have to all be traveling to that one location. We can be in a hybrid piece, but I just want to make sure that if you're 3 people in an office and there are 3 people on a Teams call, how do you still have that connectivity of those 6 people working together when, you know, those 3 people on that Teams call can't see that non-verbal connection that's going on in the room? So I think there's a lot of work for us to do in terms of, you know, coming out the other end and taking the lessons learned, but also recognizing we're human beings and we like connections.
Thank you, Ali. And Melda, finally, over to you.
Yeah, I'll keep it quick so we get some time for questions. But I'm going to mention Gucci again, and I'll explain why it's my favorite pivot. It's because it's long term. It's not a temporary pivot in a direct response to the crisis. It's a long-term fundamental change in how they operate as a business, and I think that's exciting. And I think it's sending a big message to the sector, to the industry, which is long term. We need to fundamentally change our business model and operations. And then personally, I've been out in nature a lot more. You know, the 30 minutes a day around your local park. I found out there's different species of bees. Yeah. I didn't know this the other day. You know, you're suddenly looking up, and I think that connection to nature is something I'd want to continue. And I think it's something, again, I actually think it's an opportunity for some brands. We've talked about community a lot. I think community and locality is an interesting combination now. I think we're more aware and more in sync with our local surroundings, whether that's our local butchers that we're trying to support, whether it's the local park. And I think that's something I'm going to continue to appreciate and invest in.
Brilliant answer. Yeah, I think it was 250 species of bees in the UK alone. I read that as well, Melda. Yeah. Brilliant. I've become a beekeeper. That's my to make honey. Yes. There's a few questions, but conscious a little bit time. It's on its way for 5 to 11. There's one question though that is actually, I think it's trying to challenge us a little bit. I think it's not aimed at, it's aimed at, I think, all of us. It's I'll read it out. I won't say who it's from. Does every brand have, and that's in capitals, have to have a brand purpose? By forcing this as a necessity, as it is a bit of a trend as well, will brands potentially trip themselves up to being inauthentic in the pursuit of potentially ill-suited lofty ideals, or just inauthenticity generally? And actually, that I think that's it's poignant and extremely topical in terms of setting aside the pandemic, thinking of the recent Black Lives Matters developments, and how quite a lot of brands actually have come under criticism there, haven't they, being inauthentically behaving in the wake of the George Floyd tragedy. So I think a challenging question. Probably Melda, that might be as a consultant in purpose, might be a good one for you to take on at first, and then if.
Yeah, I'll start, but I'm really interested to hear what the 2 brand leaders have, what their view is on this as well. my mind comes down to, do brands want to have meaningful connections with consumers? And I'm going to guess that most brands are going to say yes, right? And so if you look at consumer attitudes, consumer activism, consumer sentiment, all of the research, all of the charts and stats, etc., pointing to the fact that consumers are expecting this more of brands. Brands can't exist just to make money and have a single transaction in the world. I mean, you can, but my argument is that you're not going to have that meaningful connection with your customers, particularly younger generations that expect more. You're not going to retain talented employees, because most people want to work for companies like, the 2 on the phone, that have values that live by them. Now, all of that to say, it's not easy. So the brands that might want to quickly pivot will come unstuck and will get backlash. Finding a purpose and truly living it, breathing it, committing to it long term takes investment, it takes leadership. It's not easy for brands to find a purpose that aligns necessarily with their product and reason for being in the world. So it takes a lot of work. So what we can't see is brands just pivoting to be opportunistic. and capitalize on a cultural trend or zeitgeist. That's that's known. And that's when we will see purpose get a bad rep. That's when we will see consumer backlash. And so doing it properly, carefully, and finding that purpose that you can commit to for the long term is crucial.
Thanks, Melda. Ali, I don't think as Melda says, that Co-op or TSB could be accused of being inauthentic.
So does a brand need to have a brand purpose? I think a business or a brand needs to have a why, and whether you call it your brand purpose or not, it's a why. Why do you exist? What are you trying to achieve? And the why cannot just be profit. Profit is the outcome. It's not the why. And if a business doesn't feel like they have a why or a brand purpose, they need to dig deep in terms of, why does a business exist, and what's the ambition, and what's the legacy of the business that they're trying to do, because otherwise it won't be successful. And it's interesting, as a co-op, and Michael, you read out some of our values, we are part of a broader cooperative movement. And last week, the cooperative movement, of which we are, fortunately now the number one, the number two, which was number one last year, is the John Lewis Partnership. And obviously they're a cooperative owned just by their partners, not by their partners and members like we are. And the survival rate of a co-op is 76% in terms of businesses in the last 5 years, versus every other business, and we're talking more small, medium and large, is at 42%. So there are some pretty big stats that show that if you have values and purpose, your business success will be greater. So, but you can't get a really rubbish, i.e. not Melda's company, but a really rubbish company to come up with just a brand purpose line that gathers dust in a PowerPoint deck in your desk. It has got to be in the DNA, and it's got to be truly authentic. And so it's not about a marketing line. The marketing comes absolutely last. It's got to be in the DNA of how every member of that business does their job, and does it differentiated from if they're working for another business.
I couldn't agree more on that point. And I'd say if you are a brand on the line that's kind of thinking about your purpose, and round the table is just your agency or your marketing folk, you're already getting it wrong. You need every stakeholder across manufacturing, HR, etc., defining what this means for your business. Yeah.
Because I think for me the key bit is purpose has consequences, doesn't it? And purpose forces decisions. It says we're going to do this and we're not going to do this. And the best work I've seen done on purpose is a purposeful business forces those conversations, as you said, Melda, for all those stakeholders. Because it's deeper than marketing. It's the entire organisation saying, this is what we're about, this is what we're going to do. Every single decision we make will be through the lens of this purpose. So on Ali's point, it's not a slogan, it's not a clever strap line, it's not a set of words you pin on the wall. You have to live it and breathe it and be held accountable to it. And the worst bits of purpose work I've seen done are literally just awful slogans, or they're really generic. So watch out. Purpose is to describe the category you're in. And I worked for an insurance company I won't name that did some work, and it was very much it described the category, like, well, we do this, and you go, well, so does everyone else. Well, we care for people, everyone else does that. So purpose has got to go deeper. What inherently is different about your organization, and what you do and the way you do it, and the role you're going to play on society and the way you're going to help people, that is intrinsically different and special and unique that you do, and then deliver that consistently, ruthlessly deliver it. And be prepared to have then difficult conversations about what that means, and the choices you make, and the things you then choose to do or not do. And that's why, on Melda's point, this is a whole organisational bit from the CEO down that has to be lived and breathed. Lovely.
We're getting quite a lot of questions in now, and we've got maybe 2 or 3 minutes left. I'm probably not going to have time to answer or give it from here on in. So apologies to all of those who have sent further questions. And I'm looking at quite a list here now, 10 or 11, and again to 11 o'clock. So I think I'm going to have to thank wind up by thanking what's been actually a very invigorating and for me a personally educational webinar. So thanks for all your time and effort, Peter, and to you too, Ali, and to you, Melda, and I'll be hoping to hear much more from you in the near future, and indeed may even invite you back to another webinar at some point this year. You've been that good, and we'll all be. I don't think we mentioned new normal or unprecedented times, did we? Too many times. So yeah, all good, lovely. Well, look, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks for coming to the Pivot panel.